items that he changed were more like red flags.
It might just be therapy for you in that moment, but you don't know what other kid is going to hear that and feel the same way.
People are listening, but they're not hearing what people are saying.
Start doing something that influences people toward good, and you're going to end up being an influencer.
But then when I had somebody that was possibly going to be disappointed in me, that made a huge difference in who I was academically.
Right. No, I agree completely. Let's go ahead and let's go back to the Oxford, to the shooting real quick. I do want to circle back to that because one of the questions I had for you, and, as a mother who moved your daughter out and, just in the nick of time, so to speak, and she knew all these children. I'm not expecting you to have, any miraculous insight that's going to blow everyone away. You're an adult who has a child, and that child was, saved. Just it's how it happened. Your husband took a job, so you got lucky, I guess, right, is the way a lot of people are going to look at that. But obviously there's still going to be that turmoil, and I keep bringing up the rings of, right, if you're shot or wounded or was there when the shooting was happening, you're in the first ring. You are right in the middle of the war zone. Now the ring goes out to your parents, to your family, your siblings, and then your friends and relatives and other people that know you from, fill in the blank, church, work, school, whatever else. So for you guys, because of your unique situation here, what were those conversations like? Anything you'd like to share? Because there's going to be parents that are out there that their kid wasn't necessarily in the shooting, but maybe it was the town over, and their kid still had a lot of anxiety now. They're dealing with things because when you're at that point where your brain is still forming and one of your friends from another town just got shot, like that's world changing for you, and everybody's going to look at you like, what are you talking? You weren't even there, but that's real.
For my daughter specifically, having, and I regret, like, I woke her up by, like, I found out that this happened in real time. And we had, like I said, there was some other incidents that made it, like, I was in the business the couple weeks prior to that of talking people down. I ran a local community Facebook page. So I was like the voice on there saying, hey guys, calm down. They have it under control. Like they're handling it at the school. And a parent put on there something like there's a shooting at the school. I immediately deleted it because I'm like, oh gosh, here we go again. We just heard this from the week before. And then I got a phone call and I was like, oh, this is real. And like my office at the time was a couple rooms over. My daughter was here in California. We're 3 hours ahead. She's still asleep because she isn't enrolled in her new school yet. And I feel like I can't leave my computer because stuff is happening in real time on this community forum. I'm on my phone talking to people, getting real live updates of what's happening. And I'm just screaming her name. Like, so she wakes up to me. Looking back, that was not the appropriate way to handle that. But she woke up to me screaming her name. And then I was like, this is happening right now. And like I think I said previously, she had asked me to come home from that same school district 2 weeks before saying, hey, I'm not comfortable. Something bad's going to happen. So I was like, this is happening. This is real. And then she's immediately FaceTiming her friends that are at the school, trying to get a hold of people. A couple of people were still in the school when she had, on FaceTime, like, I'm good, hang up, right? Like some of them were answering their phones. Some people were talking to their parents. But one thing that from her standpoint is, she had tremendous survivor's guilt. She wasn't there to help her friends. And it's like the people that were there, they have each other, they were there. And then her new school, they don't understand what's happening at all. They still, just like most high schools in America, they still make school shooter jokes at her new school because it didn't affect them. And so she's in this unique position where she's not one of the victims from being at the school, but she doesn't have a tribe of people. And then she feels super guilty that she wasn't there at the school the day it happened. So then she's throwing herself into that community, her friends, so the school shooting happened on a Tuesday. We flew back to Michigan Thursday night. We had been here a week, and we got on a plane and immediately went back home. There was a candlelit vigil that went awry. The parents were, it was announced that they were going to be charged in a crime. They were running from the police. So the entire town is like a one stoplight in the town. There's people everywhere in this candlelit vigil, and somebody had smacked a wall, like a glass window, and it made a loud noise that somebody said was a gunshot. Somebody screamed gun, and that caused pure chaos. I wasn't next to my daughter. She was with her friends, and people were trampling people, like just getting hurt. A lady, my daughter said it was like a grandma. So my mom is in her early 60s, so I would assume it's somebody at that age. She said that she threw her she threw her body over my daughter's, like up against the wall, to protect her from getting trampled because people were getting hurt just from the pure chaos of the moment. And then that caused a whole nother set of trauma for these same children. So my daughter is at her school. And somebody had a water bottle and they smashed it and made like that loud noise. And she was on the ground underneath the table, and just everyone's looking at her like, "What's wrong with you?" But she just panicked and thought something was happening, and acted appropriately for the panic. And then because we're 3 hours ahead. Behind, a lot of the kids that were at the school, one of her good friends was in a really dire situation at the school. I'm not going to actually get into that because that's his story. But he would call her because he couldn't sleep, and he would, like, whatever their social media is, you can see who's still online. So it would be like 11 o'clock here, so he would be like, "Oh, well, Kiana's available to talk," and he would get her on the phone. I woke up one morning and she was in the fetal position, and she's 16 at the time. She's in the fetal position on the ground, like rocking. And I'm like, "What is happening?" And she's like, "I had to listen to him. I had to let him tell me this story." And it was horrendous. And I was like, why didn't you come and get me? Like, come and wake me up. And she's like, "I wasn't there, so I need to be there for him now." And I'm not saying that I would have done anything different, but there's just like you were saying, the rings of all of these situations. And then even her as a child, she wanted to help. She wanted to be able to do something for her friends to make them feel better. And there's nothing that you can do. The only thing that can be done to make anyone feel better is to create a safety net, a safe school, a safe community. And because of all of these things that happened, and some of the things that fell apart within the community, some of the things that happened in the school, the lack of communication between the parties that led to this happening, there's so much finger pointing that it is less of a safe community. So there's clear backpacks, there's metal detectors at the school. There's all of these things that are there in place now, but from a feeling standpoint, the school system is a lot less safe than it was, because this was something that happened to other people, and now it's something that happens to us. And so that sense of safety is gone.
Yeah. And I'm glad you said that, because that's, I think, in the aftermath, right, it's hard to try to tell a child who's either experienced that or, like you say, has knows those people, so has survivor's guilt or something similar, right? Even if it's not, like, there's a lot of different things, and everybody just jumps to it needs to have a label. Well, it's not the same for every single person, so you can't just slap a label on it and call it a day. It's not a box to check. So this child is needing somebody to hear his story, and that story can then literally traumatize another kid who already has survivor's guilt and is now going to literally, likely have either dreams or reoccurring thoughts of what it would be like to be in that scenario, or feel like that they were in that scenario in a dream, PTSD type of state. And again, it's like there's no right thing or wrong thing to do there, right? It's how can you tell a child whose brain is still forming, that has guilt that they weren't there and that they could have helped, because that's what everybody wants to think, that that it's okay that you weren't there, and it's okay to be strong for people. But when it starts affecting you, you have to know when enough is enough, and you just have to say, listen, we need to get other people involved. You need to talk to a professional, a therapist, somebody who does this for a living, because all that's going to happen right now is I'm going to keep feeling worse, and I want to be there for you, but maybe talk to a professional who knows how to help you reframe this, who knows how to understand it, unpack it, and process this. And then we can talk more about it, and you can actually share with me how they helped you, but this is not helping me. And like you said, your daughter not even waking you up. That's another, that red flag goes off in my head, where I'm thinking, if my kid doesn't, like, that's a failure on me, is the way I'll feel. And I know that you probably felt the same way, because as a parent, you want your kid in that scenario to go, you know what, I'm going to go wake my dad up. I'm going to go wake my mom up, because this is important.
I think from a children's standpoint, when somebody has something so heavy, and I guess I can kind of draw the line between like the military situations that I deal with. If you're not a trained professional, it's not lessening your load of things to carry, giving it to somebody if they don't have the tools to help you. It just means you're carrying it also. So it's not, and that is where I think that we need to have the adults readily available. My daughter did come to me, the next day and say, hey, this is what happened, so that I can get the appropriate people involved to help, to make sure that this child is getting the help that he needs also. Because if his mom doesn't know, she might think, okay, he's handling it okay, but really he's on the phone in the middle of the night unpacking these things with somebody who doesn't have the tools to help him process what is happening. And I think you touched on an important point when you said that they need to be heard. I think a lot of the times, in a prevention standpoint and in an aftermath standpoint, people are listening, but they're not hearing what people are saying. And and a lot of things can't be quantified. So if I have a feeling about something, if I'm a student in a school and I have a feeling that this person is off, or if I have a feeling of this, and the people that you go to talk to, or if you report it to the okay to say line or something, and there's not quantifiable information, evidence, I would say, it is very important that these children are heard, and that stuff is discussed with a team of people. And I think from a prevention standpoint, that is something that really needs to be addressed, how threat assessments are handled in school situations. If it's like, oh, well, Melissa doesn't have access to weapons, so that's not going to happen. Whereupon that doesn't mean that I'm not in a bad place or thinking something bad, or there's access to lethal means might not be immediate, but that doesn't mean I'm not going to be able to do something later. And I think a lot of things, like, these kids are together all the time, and they really need to be heard. And there needs to be, it's very important to their mental health all across the board that there's somebody that hears what they're saying, that there's somebody that's interested in like, let me listen to what you're saying. And maybe like this whole deer head situation that happened prior. The kids were all upset. The kids saw something coming. They felt it. They knew something was going to happen. But none of the adults, myself included, we didn't want to listen because we were too busy justifying how that wasn't an issue. That wasn't a threat. And so that's where mistakes were made. And if there was the proper protocols in place across the board, it could have been an individualized situation the next time something happens, like, to be assessed appropriately. The resource officer would have been involved in that assessment instead of the resource officer that is typically at the school wasn't there the day that the school shooting happens, So he wasn't looped in. We did have other resource officers, but there's protocols that are in place that just weren't handled appropriately. And I think when I go back to community, I, as a community member, need to know what are the steps that are going to be in place if something like this happens, because I do want to prevent a school shooting. I don't want to be having this conversation later on when it happens again.
Yeah, I didn't know that the school resource officer wasn't there that day. That, from my perspective, that there's no excuse for that.
Was a backup one there, just the one that was normally there that everybody kind of like trusted and all that. He wasn't there. So there was a resource officer. There was like the one. I know that the resource officer that I'm speaking of, he has survivor's guilt. He was ex-military. That guy was kind of a badass. He was like, my son didn't show up to a Zoom meeting during COVID. He showed up at my house and knocked on my door. Like, hey, what's going on? How come he's not, is everything good here? Like that guy really cared. And I think that he was out for a medical issue with someone in his family. And it just so happened to be a coincidence. But I could be wrong, but I don't believe until after the shooting started, a resource officer wasn't pulled in to assess the situation. Like, this child has bullets and guns on his paper. It should be part of from my understanding, the resource officer should have been brought in to also assess that situation.
Right. Well, yeah, 100%. That they should be the main person that's being brought in. You bring in a counselor, that's great. They need to deal with that. At the same time, it's that communication breakdown to where the guy who's the police officer, having responded to a situation many times where I don't have all of the facts of what's going on, I can mistake who the bad person is in this, right? The one I should be paying attention to, who's actually the threat. I'm looking at this person as the threat, and then somebody else attacks me from the other side, and it's like, oh, thank you for not giving me that information. Actually, as a school resource officers, I think some changes need to happen there personally, and not in a, hey, we need to fix them because they're messed up. It's the opposite. They need to be better supported. Having one person who has been trained their entire career, I don't know of a single police officer who on day one of the academy is taught, you need to go into the fray. You need to be the one who jumps on the grenade and blows up and saves all your buddies. You need to be the one who goes out and kills the bad guys. You're not taught that. It's the opposite. You're taught, number one, you go home at the end of every day. That's number one. It will always be number one, and don't ever forget it. We're going to say this every single day of the academy so you understand. Your life, this is a job. You are to protect and serve, but you are going home at the end of the day. So do not put yourself in a situation where you are going to die. Wait for backup. If you are not able to escalate things to the next level, right? So somebody brings out a stick. Well, now you can use lethal force because somebody could kill you with a stick. Somebody just has just fists. Okay, you can't justify just shooting them unless they're 6'4" and 300 pounds and they could kill you with their bare hands. You can always escalate one more because you are supposed to win as the police. That's the point. That's how you go home at the end of the day. Well, you know how you could also fix that? You don't have to now give officers bazookas and tanks to be able to take out the next step if somebody shows up with a gun. How about you have another officer? And I know this is something that to me is a no-brainer from a tactics perspective, and having the perspective of in a combat zone, like, you're never just going to go run out on your own to do any mission ever. You always are going to have another person with you at the bare minimum, and it's usually going to be in a group, right? Same in law enforcement, though, it's the opposite. You're always broken into individual, or, it's sometimes like New York City and places where there's tens of thousands of cops. For such a large place, they will have two officers riding in a car, and so you do have another officer. But you're both wearing, not level 3 body armor. You're not both rolling around with AR-15s or AK-47s or shotguns. You just have a pistol. And so if you start out outgunned, Or in this scenario, even though the police officer had a pistol, I'm sure, and the shooter has a pistol, right? But here's the thing: that kid, he's just a kid, not a police officer, but he has everything that is going on that day. He's planned, so he already has the advantage on so many different steps that as a civilian, if you've never worked in that work, you don't understand why having already planned this out gives you so many advantages that a person who's more well trained, has all this experience, they're still going to be fighting from behind the curve because you've already figured out how you're going to do this, and you already most likely have figured out how you're going to deal with the resource officer. That being said, this was the one rare instance where he doesn't shoot the resource officer. He hands him the gun, and there were still bullets in it, right? I believe they said there were still.
Technically, he didn't hand anybody the gun. They weren't even sure who the shooter was when he walked in. He knew he was going to get caught. He put the gun on a trash can and then sat down. So the police walked in, and it wasn't in. So the police came into the building, and he had known that he was going to be taken into custody at that point. So when he saw the people running in, it took them a minute to realize he was actually the shooter. Somebody was saw it on the trash can because he had placed it on top of the handgun on top of the trash can, and then that's when they were like, all right, get down, because he didn't surrender per se, but he took himself out of the situation.
Gave himself up.
Yeah, correct. And then
wow. Okay.
Yeah, so he had walked out and put the gun down. There was another thing that I don't understand, and this might not be the appropriate place to talk about this, but there was another officer at the school, and I don't know what happened. She opened the door to the bathroom where he was, and then closed it and backed out and left.
That is something that I heard just a snippet of that somewhere, but same thing. They didn't have any more details, and so they were unsure how real that was.
Anything, but that was real. That was on the video. She definitely opened the door, didn't go in, shut the door, and walked away.
To the boys' bathroom.
Yes, where the shooter was. And I'm not sure if it was prior to the last victim being shot or not.
Oh, okay. Okay, so I thought when you're saying this, I'm picturing, because he goes in, again, this is the story I've heard from the news and from the information I've been able to gather through research, is he's in the principal's office, parents are called in, they say, hey, he's doing all these things, drawing guns. He has the pistol in his backpack at the time. Correct. Their parents both refused to take him out of school because they both need to go back to work.
They were never asked to take him home.
Really?
Yep. That was the news made that up, and that kind of just went all around. The school never asked him to be taken home. So they were in a hurry to get back to work, but they were never asked to take him home. Because, I mean, if they would have been asked to take him home, I believe the school would have called the police to come and get him, or what I mean? But the school did not ask the parents to take him home. They were handling it how they thought was appropriate at the school. They had given the parents some resources as far as mental health and asked that they made him a mental health appointment.
Within 48 hours.
Yeah, but they did not ever, I don't know. I'm just trying to set the record straight. They didn't ask them to take him home, and the parents didn't refuse because they weren't asked to take him home. So then he went back to class with his backpack, participated in the next class, walked out of that class into a bathroom, got out his backpack, took his pistol out of the backpack, went in the hallways, but he also ended in the bathroom. The last victim was shot there.
Oh, okay.
So that,
wow.
And I don't believe it was the same bathroom, but I don't know why I think that. So that isn't actual evidence that I have. I believe that it was a different bathroom, but that was where two of the kids were in the bathroom, hiding from him in the bathroom stall. And other, when I say my daughter was speaking to one of the kids, it was the kid that escaped from the bathroom.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. Again, all this is, so much of this is new information because, again, when you, and I already know it, right? So it shouldn't really be that surprising. But again, it's like the news just so often will go, and I'm sure they asked somebody and somebody said, or somebody.
Right. Or they assume, like, why wouldn't you ask them to take them home when they have all these, And from my standpoint, like, obviously I'm not in this situation. I don't work in a school. I don't assess children, but he had changed things on the drawing. And those, to me, from working in the mental health world as much as I do, the items that he changed were more like red flags than what he didn't. And it just seemed like that should have been talked about. A risk assessment should have been done immediately for that. And I don't know.
What all that we were told was he drew a picture of a pistol, and then when he was, essentially he found out that he was going to be called to the office, he scribbled over it.
He made
that's what it
different
said.
changes. I can send you the before and after.
Okay.
Because I have pictures of that.
That'd be awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
that's wild because, right, you can, in one thought process, he just got a new gun.
Yeah.
So I get where he could draw a picture of that gun and then justify it and be like, I just got this. This was my early Christmas present. Why would I not draw a gun?
No,
it's scary, but
he wrote some things like, we're all friends here, something like that. I don't remember exactly, so I don't want to even say. I'll have to find it and show you. Yeah. But it was stuff that I was like I love OHS for Oxford High School, and that wasn't on the original drawing. So that was like, wait a minute. But from my standpoint, I don't work with children. I work with people that have mental health issues, and from a military standpoint, a lot, and that have been involved with traumatic situations or taking another human's life or watching people die. So for me, things that stick out are different maybe than somebody who doesn't have the life and death experience.
Yeah, that's, again, it's wild, but that's why I think bringing out, talking to people who have firsthand experience, know somebody who was actually there, as opposed to just reading what the news says. Because, again, as you're going to find through your entire life, what you read in the news is not really what's happening. You're going to get, overall, there was a shooting, there was a kid, he did have a pistol, he did have parents, they did run. All the rest of the facts are pretty subjective at that point. And when you brought up the 2.5, right, as the number of school shootings, big school shootings that we have in the United States year after year, just because I was curious on statistics and was looking up some specific things, and then I just looked, what is the number that Google says is the number of school shootings? Well, then it pulls up websites that say that there's literally thousands and thousands of them each year. And I'm like, okay, so what are they talking about? Well, come to find out, they're counting everything from kids in, Nowhereville, Oklahoma, where I grew up, who shot a sign with a shotgun that, technically speaking, was within 500 yards of a school. So therefore it's school's property. Therefore that was a school shooting. And they count that as a school shooting. And so you see, and it's really
convoluted.
It's really a disservice, because these are I think one of the websites was from one of the school shootings, and I believe it was the Sandy Hook website, the one that they had formed afterwards, and it was like the Sandy Hook Promise, or I'm going to get that. I'm probably going to get it wrong. But that was the page that it recommended, and that's where I saw the numbers that were so crazy inflated. And then I talked to some friends of mine who are from California, who have friends who are teachers in the worst schools in California, like Compton, like Oakland, rough areas. And they have shootings there regularly, but it's not even, it's after hours. It's two kids, fighting over drugs that used to be students, but aren't students there anymore. And there's, two drug dealers who are trying to claim the property of the school where they can sell all their drugs to all these school kids. Of course, that's going to be highly contested drug runners and gang activity areas.
Statistically, mass school shootings, which is 4 or more casualties, occur in predominantly wealthy white neighborhoods.
Yeah. And the other statistic I like to bring out to people, because again, being a police officer, you learn you're much more likely to get shot at work or at a place of business where a disgruntled ex-husband, ex-wife,
right,
ex-lover, stalker, whatever, of somebody that you work with, not necessarily, you're not even involved in the situation, and you still end up getting shot. Going postal came from,
right,
you guessed it, Oklahoma, where a worker who has no issues necessarily with a lot of the people that he shot at work that day. He just wanted to send a message, and he was angry at the hierarchy, whoever was over him, supervisors, whatever. And so he literally just brought a gun in to a place that's known to be, full of a bunch of people who just kind of want to be left alone and do a job where it's pretty much you do your job, and
ironically,
it's mostly happy people.
I was in a post office that was robbed about a year ago.
Really?
Yeah, and
Wow.
I didn't even know that happened. And
How can you rob a post office?
They robbed them for packages. I talked to the postmaster, because this was after the Oxford High School shooting, and I was talking to some people from the community, and I was making general conversation about how many times you've had a gun pointed at you. And they were like, 0, Melissa. The answer is 0. And I'm like, 0? No, the answer's not 0. Like, the answer is 0. And they're just like,
right.
What's your answer? I'm like, 11. And they're like, no, that's not a normal number. And then like 2 days later, I was at the post office. Nobody pointed a gun at me. They did have guns. And the postmaster was like, oh, again? And I'm like, what do you mean again? I'm just here trying to mail. I think I was mailing my daughter something, or some, you know what I mean? Like, and he said, yeah, they've been coming in, and robbing, just taking packages because they hope there's Social Security or tax refund checks. Maybe it was like that time of year, and they were like, look, he's like, they are targeting for specific things. They just take the packages, they dump half the stuff, and they leave. And I'm like, well, that's random. And I was in the front, in line, and the robbers like came to the front, but then what? That's just completely random. And I wasn't really affected by it so much, but it was still like, what in the heck is happening? We had to stay in there for a minute. Like, that's really, really random that this is going on. It mostly affected, the people in the back, but yeah. And then, I also had like sidebar story, the local Oxford Village police held guns on me at one point because I turned aggressively. Like, that's just completely like lack of education amongst the police community. But
turned aggressively while driving?
Yes. Yep. And then I had a Mercedes SUV with like super black tinted out windows, and I don't know who they thought I was, but they thought it was someone else.
So it's funny you say that, because I was going to say, so you always hear as a police officer stories on whatever it was, fill in the blank TV shows where it's like, I went my whole career and never had to pull my gun out of the holster. And you're like, I don't know, Grandpa, what it was like back in that day, but that is insanity to me, because I'm pulling my gun out of its holster 2 to 3 times on a shift on the regular. And I'm doing that because that's, again, common sense. And it's an example, the worst example ever. I'm going to go ahead and share it. But that exact same thing. I had somebody who I turned on my lights. They didn't pull over, and we kept driving, but they weren't speeding. They weren't trying to get away. They just weren't seeing my lights. They're not paying attention, is what I'm assuming. But then again, they may also be getting guns out because their windows are blacked out. Yeah. You cannot see inside the car. And I'm like, it has nothing to do with what type of car it is. It's the fact that this is at night. It's not in the nicest area in our city, and they're just not stopping, which means they're getting ready for something, or they're not paying attention, and I don't know which.
Okay.
One of them I end up dead, so I'm going to take the precaution so I don't end up dead. So they finally pull over, and again, they didn't roll their windows down, so I can't see them at all, and I don't know what's happening.
Okay.
So I get out of my car, and I'm coming from having been in the Marines,
Right.
4 combat tours and special operations. I'm getting out of my vehicle, spotlights on their mirror, and I am not positioned like normal police officers pull right behind the vehicle. I didn't do that.
Yeah.
I came out and came at an angle,
Okay.
so all of my headlights are on them, and my spotlight is blinding them. And then I exited my vehicle. I went way back and out because there was another vehicle that I could hide behind if they jump out and started shooting.
Mm-hmm.
So now I'm creeping up, and they can't see me at all, and they think I'm coming from the opposite side. And so I'm yelling out. I'm like, roll your windows down.
Right.
Roll your windows down. And they're not responding. So I'm still like, I'm telling headquarters, go ahead and send me another unit when they weren't stopping.
Yeah.
So my other buddy's about to pull up at this time. He's pulling up. And so he's getting out. He doesn't know also what's going on.
Right.
And finally, the door cracks, and a lady yells out toward the car, I just got this tint on my windows. I can't roll the windows down. So again, I don't know if this is true. I don't know if there's 5 guys in there with guns, and she's just saying that, and she's the one driving. So I said, okay, I want you to roll your windows down anyway, and I want all the hands that are in that vehicle to be sticking out of the windows. Yeah. Now I have my gun drawn, and I have it pointed in the direction of the car. I'm not up in somebody's face. That being said, I see little tiny hands coming out of little hands come out of the back windows. I feel in that moment like an idiot. However,
but
I know I did everything that was justified.
Yeah.
Right.
The lady that
I know
pulled me over, I don't think it was broad daylight in the village of Oxford. Yeah. And I will tell you, so I turned, and I don't think I turned aggressively, but I turned, and then I pulled right over. And she was on one side with a gun at my window, and my 14-year-old daughter at the time was in the other window with the other guy, and he's looking at her like, why do we have guns on them? Like, I could see it in his face. And I was like, can I help you? And she was like, I think she was panicking, like trying to find a reason to be like that. And then I had a Gold Star license plate, like a Michigan Gold Star license plate, and she said, what license plate is that? Do you think you're special? Did you make that with a Gold Star? And I was like, no, actually. And she was like, never heard of it. And she was just like, did you make that yourself? You thought you needed a Gold Star? And I'm just like, oh, okay, lady, like, listen. And then she actually pulled me over another time, and I deserved to be pulled over. I ran a red light. During the day, it was a flashing light because it's busier, and like I went to a school meeting, was zoned out, just was like, as soon as the car in front. At night, it was a flashing light. Excuse me. At night, it was a flashing light. During the day, it wasn't. So as soon as the car in front of me went, I just followed them because I'm used to it being a red light, green light, thinking, oh, it turned to a green light. So I ran a stop, per se. And then I pulled over, and I had a concealed carry permit. And I know you don't run that and look at, but I put my hands on the steering wheel, rolled down my window, and she's like, why don't you have your license and registration ready? And I'm like, my wallet fell underneath my seat. Like, this is for your safety, like, so that you feel comfortable. I didn't want to be grabbing underneath my seat. And she's like, next time you have your license and your registration ready. And I'm like, I don't think so. Like,
that's also a bad idea. Yeah.
She definitely is like RoboCop up in that village. But because I was like thinking, like, lady, I will get it for you, but it's under my seat. I'm telling you right now where my hands are going, so you know what they're doing. But
right, agreed. Yeah, no, that's what you're literally teaching her what she should already know. Obviously, it's funny. One kid I pulled over, I'll just share this because he rolls his window down immediately. His hands never left. He pulls the keys out of the ignition. He turns it off, pulls the keys out. And he did this like very fluidly. So it just immediately happens. Right. He comes to a stop, and the window's going down as the keys are going on his finger, and he puts both hands like this.
Oh, good.
When I walked up there, I was like, so is your father or mother a police officer? And he was like, actually, my dad's a firefighter, but yeah, we have a lot of police officer friends. And this is something that our police officer friend told us to always do. And so I just always have. And this is an 18-year-old kid, and obviously he didn't get a ticket. And obviously if people did that more often, especially at night where you don't know, man, when we have to deal with, you don't know that I just had to pull guns on a lady and yell at her and sneak around and get another unit out. That didn't happen in the same night. That I can remember exactly, but you never know if that was the last call, or I was just going into a vacant house where maybe somebody was hiding to ambush me. You never know what call we had just before this, or what day we had, and my wife and I are
stick my hands out the window. But I've taught my kids, like, roll your windows down and put your hands on the wheel, so everyone knows where your hands are. Like, if they want something from you, they're going to ask you for it, right? Like, always, because my son, when he got his license, he's like, shouldn't I be getting this stuff? No. Like, if they want it, they will ask you for it, and let everyone always know where your hands are. But I didn't learn that from, like, a police officer. I learned that from, like, a black man who was, like, we were having a discussion, and I was saying, like, there's not a difference between me and you. And he's like, I'll tell you right now, there's a difference if your son or my son get pulled over. And I was like, oh, that's actually, like, from where we live, that probably was a valid point. And then I started thinking about, like, what would you want to happen, like, best case scenario if you were a police officer? Like, I want to know where your hands are, or whatever.
Right.
But that was
and that.
That was a racial diversity English class I took in college. It was about racial diversity in literature. And I learned so much in that class. It has nothing to do with what I actually learned. It was one of the greatest experiences I ever had.
Yeah. And again, right, I see that as an officer. I see that as a kid taking an extra step to help me feel safe about my job. Whereas another cop, bad attitude, had a bad day, currently going through a divorce. He's just got cussed out by somebody who's on the whatever school board. He can't write him a ticket or what. You never know what call we were just on, and then he rolls up on that same thing and he gets angry at them because that looks suspicious. So now he's all right, I'm going to you're acting super shady. Nobody does that. So I'm going to pull you out and search your vehicle. And so you just never know, but at the same time,
humans, right? So
it is.
You can't predict human nature or what somebody else's experiences are to view. Like, we could be in the like my younger brother that's still alive, and we were raised in the same household. We have completely different models of the world. Like, he's not in a good place. He is not very successful, and everything is because my brother died. His brother died. You don't know what it's like. Whereupon everything that I've done since then is because my brother died, but I went a different way, right? Like, I threw myself into the military community. I made sure that I understand how to, have suicide prevention phone calls and how to do these things. And I'm the vice president of the 3rd Battalion 1st Marines Association. I work for a nonprofit organization. That's all because my brother died. So it's the same story, different version of the world.
Yeah. And I think that's something that, going back to the school shooting, where if you're a kid and you've experienced, you're one of the rings of this has influenced your life, you can do that. You can turn it around and use that as fuel to do good things. The lady that I interviewed, who was the lady I interviewed up in Oregon, she was the grief counselor and went and helped those children. Several of those kids were going through extreme survivor's guilt because they weren't shot and the person next to them was. And then a year later, all of the kids who were shot, who were part of the rings of that have been all influenced, they all had a big, almost like a welcome party, where they invited every first responder and all the grievance counselors and everybody to come back. And they all had made this video where they held up a sign that said the one word of how they felt on the day of the shooting. One thing that that really encapsulated their feeling at that moment. And then they flipped it over, and it was, how do I feel on this day right now? What's the one word that, and all of it, of course, is just, gratefulness, just grateful to be alive, privileged to have experienced and been able to now help other people. And people were literally turning their lives around all to the better. One girl even had experienced that when the shooting started, all of her friends looked to her as to what to do. And so she, with the help of the counselor just asked her, what did you learn about yourself that day? And the girl stopped and hadn't even thought of that and was like, well, all of my friends actually looked to me, and I seemed to keep a level head. Mm-hmm. Like, I heard the noise. I knew it was gunshots. This wasn't a drill. And so I got everybody to move away from the door, to do this, to block the door, whatever it was that she did in particular. And so she decided from that she should get into law enforcement, into being a first responder, into doing something where you can handle that stress and help other people in their moment of need. Because if you can handle stress in the middle of an active shooter scenario, I promise you, you're going to be able to handle stress in any situation you find yourself.
Yeah,
so
that's awesome.
Again, you can turn it all around, and you can use that as fuel. And even the same thing, if a kid is out there and he's feeling depressed and he's feeling down and he's isolating, and he stumbles across and he starts hearing stories of survivors and people who have turned their lives around. Maybe it makes that person, instead of wanting to possibly think about taking themselves out of the equation, or even worse, right, wanting to be like those school shooters, be infamous, to go do something like that they instead use their energy to, maybe I'm going to be the person who goes and talks to people, starts a community on YouTube. When you're young and you do this, when you do it, when I do it, there's so many of us that are our age that are at a position where we want to now give back, and we're, financially able to spend our time doing these nonprofits and these things like that. It's not like it's that much easier. It's just that when you're young and you start doing something like that, you don't have to have a platform to where you are somebody who was a survivor. But at the same time, if you're in a scenario where you're young and you decide to just start fighting school shootings by fill in the blank, you're just going to talk about mental health, mm-hmm. and you start just sharing your story online, start a YouTube channel. It's super easy. Right. It's free to start. And you just literally start sharing your life experiences of feeling isolated. It might just be therapy for you in that moment, but you don't know what other kid is going to hear that and feel the same way. Mm-hmm. And you're going to get stupid trolls, posting messages. I'm just launching my trailer for my podcast. I've already had trolls just messaging me, telling me that I need to take things more serious. And they think that what I should do instead is, I don't even know what they were trying to say because it was all discombobulated. They were probably not even Americans. It was probably some fake profile from somebody in another country who was just doing that, because literally that exists. But the point is, right, you're going to get that. You're going to get trolls. You're going to get hate. That's life. Right. You're going to learn that real fast. But what you will find is that one positive comment of one person's life that you can change for the better is what really starts to motivate you and change your life, period. Mm-hmm. You want to be the person who's a subject matter expert at any topic you want. Start doing research, start having conversations. Just start something, and you'll be quite surprised. If I find somebody like that out there, who's some high school kid who now has started just reaching out to other victims, mm-hmm. or reaching out to people and trying to find out what the truth is, since we now know that what we're hearing on the news isn't true. Let's start actually collecting that data from first person of people who were there. And because you're a high school kid, it's different from a 40-plus-year-old dude who was in former law enforcement. They don't trust people like me. I'm an outsider. You're a kid. You can still reach those people. that's going to be a kid that I want on my podcast. That's somebody I want to talk to who's been out there collecting that data firsthand, and again is trying to make a difference with their life instead of going down the dark path.
Mm-hmm. No, I definitely agree. And those people are the ones that can make a difference. And it's like the old saying, like the ripple effect. You don't know, like, the one person that you affect and how, exponentially that can affect other people. Like the janitor that gave me gum in middle school. Like, if that wouldn't have, I've given plenty of people gum or food or sandwiches, and it's all because that he did that for me. And I don't know. He seemed old when I was in middle school, but I would love to find that guy's family and be like that. Like, you don't think what a noble role to be a janitor, but that guy was a freaking hero. Like, that guy was you know what I mean? And so just spreading love in any way, shape, or form, or being okay to make it weird, especially with teenagers, because everyone wants to be the ideal, and we don't want to talk about our weird quirks or this or that, but to make things easier, just to like, let's have a conversation, or everyone wants to act tough and not be seen as weak, and that's such, honestly,
vulnerability is going to be the new currency with the next generation. You're not going to get anywhere with people unless you're okay with being vulnerable.
And that every relationship that you have has to have like a foundation of that, because it is just like build on the things that we're afraid to say, that it all comes out later in any situation. Like, it's just like, I feel like the more the kids especially make it okay that they're having a bad day, or they make it okay that this isn't okay with them, that's just going to open up so many doors and end so much, I don't know, end some stigma, or help us prevent people doing bad things, or wanting to make a name for themselves, because who about that stuff, right? Like, like a lot of the people, and again, another topic, and we've been talking for a while now, but like but we need to talk about the suicide stuff without it. Like, there shouldn't be, I don't want to be like old school Catholic, like you're all going to hell, and tell people that.
I was literally about to say that, because that's exactly what I grew up with was, you're going straight, you're going to burn forever. Do not ever even contemplate. Now, that being said, so my mom's older sister committed suicide, and then my grandfather committed suicide. And I think because I was a police officer and I had to work suicides all the time, and I think having seen family members of yours, and you're just like, wait, I don't understand how, right? We're the same. I got my blood from my grandfather. Why did you, what? Like, you checked out, but then you see strangers, and then you see one example. There was a lady who committed suicide, and her husband just rode Harleys all the time. That was their thing, right? That's what they like to do. And she wrote in a note, just a very simple note, that you love your Harley more than you do me. And he's literally out riding his Harley with his buddies. When she does this, she knows that she's doing this on purpose at this time, so that when he gets home, he's going to have, I'm sure they probably just had a fight, and he left on his Harley, and that's the moment she takes to commit suicide. And it was from the outside, and I'm just a police officer who's there to write a report. I don't know anything about this lady. I can't know anything about her other than what's on this note, just by seeing the scene. But it's so surreal to be there at this person's worst moment, trying to fight him to keep from going inside and seeing what happened to his wife, right? And because that's going to traumatize him. I know that. And this is just my personal perspective from my grandfather's suicide. What I think personally is that, you remember how you said it so great earlier, when the child is, when that kid who has survivor's guilt is telling your daughter his burdens, he's not lightening his load. Imagine them both wearing rucksacks. He's not taking things out of his backpack and putting them in hers so that they both bear that load and it's easier. It's the opposite. He's just handing her an equally heavy backpack for her to also wear from now on. the same idea, which is you're not taking your pain and making it disappear. It's not burning up in
Right.
ashes and disappearing into the atmosphere. Instead, you're literally spreading that pain to all the people who know you. You're just
Right.
giving them your pain. And that pain may actually be compounded because you're spreading it to possibly dozens and hundreds of people who now are going to be experiencing your pain. And it's one action that happens in 1 second that is
Yep.
forever. It's final. You can you could try to commit suicide and it not work. Like what happens obviously again in females, young females often attempt it, and I have family members who attempted suicide more times than I could possibly count. That I've been around scenarios where women specifically and it's heartbreaking. But I think that if we don't address suicide, and it's not right, the answer is not to stigmatize it more and to make it just sound like, it's this, you're going straight to hell. And if we just tell all kids they're going to go burn in hellfire, that's just going to scare everybody away from doing it. No, and that's where you get these kids that are so in so much pain that they want to they want to make other people miserable. And this is from the Columbine. So from the Columbine shooters, now that we actually have their diaries, you see that they want to give pain to people. And Harris specifically, he was the psychopath of the two. The other one, Klebold, not so much. Actually, turns out he may have just been in a lot of pain, had rage, but he was really pulled into it by Harris. But you see where instead of just taking that energy, that fuel, like you were talking about, and instead of directing it at something, I was very disgruntled and I had a lot of anger too. And I was isolated quite a bit as a kid, as I was coming up and having to go switch schools and all that. And I took that energy, and I didn't know why at the time, but I took that energy and I started just moving something that was heavy, because that took energy out of me. So if I would go outside and chop down a tree out in the woods, that is what I did for therapy. I didn't know that was therapy. I also didn't know that swinging an axe and building core strength would, in the Marine Corps, make the difference between me fracturing my legs and getting stress fractures, or carrying heavy weights too, would be the difference between that, or not pulling muscles, or whatever it was. Like, I never knew that all the things that I was doing to just deal with the pain that I was in at that moment was actually going to benefit me later if I applied it correctly. And that's what ultimately, as we wrap up this podcast, it has been a long one. I apologize for keeping you on so long, but we've covered so many good topics. I think if there's a kid out there and he's hearing this podcast, I don't think there's any right one thing to say to a kid in that position. What we can tell you, and you've heard it from everyone, is it's temporary. You will get out of high school. That being said, there's, Klebold, they were both about to get out of high school, and they had the rest of their lives to look forward to, and they chose the route that they did. It's easy for us to say that. That being said, you can apply yourself to do something that you want, whatever you're passionate about. You could still apply yourself to do that. Use your energy, channel it toward that one thing, and you can find yourself. Every kid now, like 85% of Gen Z, say they want to be influencers. Here's the clue: how to be an influencer. Start doing something that influences people toward good, and you're going to end up being an influencer, and people are going to want to pay you money to do good things.
On what you're saying, and to feed into, and because we all have egos, and it all applies. Like, honestly, to success is the best revenge. Like, it is the best revenge. Like, people that were mean 100%. To me because I had butter sandwiches. I mean, like, Okay.
Yeah.
Like honestly, and
Real.
I didn't go out and do anything special. Like I just picked a path that made me happy and helped other people along the way. And that's just like that's all I do. Like you just move on through life doing the next thing. And man, like I love my life. I have a great life. I love my family. I have amazing kids, and I had a bunch of really shitty times, and people were really mean to me. People were really mean to me, and like I just I don't I'm good. You know what I mean? Like I don't know how to say that in a way that makes sense, but
Yeah.
like like
No, it does. It
like
makes perfect
eventually
sense.
that is such a small amount of time in your life and you don't realize it at the time because 4 years of a of an 18-year life is a large portion of your life, but when you're 30 that's not very much. When you're 40 it's definitely not very much of my life. I barely even remember that. I see people and they're like, hey Melissa, and I'm like, I know you. You know what I mean? Because it wasn't that
Yeah.
influential in my
Yeah.
life. But man, like I guess you don't want to be known for hurting somebody or doing something like that because nobody's going to remember you
Right.
fondly. And being remembered isn't the goal. Like being spreading love to the next generation and being able to have like my kids are amazing. Like you take that away from yourself if maybe you don't want kids but you have other people's kids or your neighbor's kids or someone else that you get to influence positively and see all the things they do. That's freaking awesome. And that doesn't die. Like love doesn't die. It really doesn't. It just keeps going and growing. And like I again to bring about the janitor, like the love that he showed me years ago is the same love that my children show to other people in the world.
Mhm. Yeah. And you have no idea what small acts of kindness, no matter what job or position that you're in, is going to affect other people for decades
Mm-hmm.
of their entire life. And that's what you should actually be spending your time doing, because life, like you said, it gets amazing when you're doing good things. Other people are being affected positively, and then they're doing the same thing. And that's really what we need to end school shooting. It has to be a community.
Yep.
It has to be of people who are just helping other people in their area with do what you
Right.
can with what you
Right.
have where
And
you're at.
there's always going to be weirdos, and that's okay. I'm a weirdo. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't want to be invisible, but if I'm known for being a weirdo, then that's great. Like, good for me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome.
All right. I've had an outstanding podcast. We've covered so many topics that I've wanted to cover, and you had examples that was honestly, you knocked it out of the park, and I really appreciate you taking the extra time
Absolutely.
to do that.
My brother is Lance Corporal Michael Hanks. He was killed in Fallujah in November of 2004. He received the Silver Star for some actions that he did a couple of days prior to his death. Yep. U.S. Marine Corps, 3rd Battalion, 1st Marines, Lima Company.
Awesome. And that's where you are now helping with their
I am the
social
vice
media.
president of the 3rd Battalion 1st Marines Association, and we kind of bridge the gap for anyone that was in the Marine Corps in that battalion. And we're just recently been doing some stuff with the new guys. We have a podcast. If anyone ever needs anything, we love to reach out and help anybody. We are taking on new members. It's $30 a year, but helps all that stuff.
Share that link with me. We'll definitely
and I love it. I love being able to talk to.
Okay.
Everyone always jokes like I know more Marines than they do because I know like the older generation and then the newer generation, right? So yeah it's a good time for sure. Yeah. Okay, awesome.
Okay. Well, thanks again.
You too.
All right. Well, take care. Have a